Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here. Hey, a friendly reminder, if you could please join us at mikeslater.locals.com. That is where we are now putting everything in our effort to get away from big tech. Why am I working for big tech for free? Why are we still going to big tech and selling ourselves to them? Doesn't make any sense. So Dave Rubin has a new platform called Locals. So mikeslater.locals.com, join us over there. The mission statement is it's a quiet place where we can think deeply about important things. So that'd be awesome if you could head over there. So the governor of California, I live here in San Diego, the governor of California has lifted our stay-at-home orders. Shocking that the week Joe Biden becomes president, everything's opening up across the country. Right? Cuomo's talking about opening up. Mayor of Chicago says it's got to open up. Michigan governor, who's been a tight lockdown this whole time. And it's all, the science. Then the WHO comes out and says, hey, everyone, you know what? We should start to consider cycle thresholds when we're testing people. Yeah, no kidding. Been saying that for months. Here's the deal. It's all human nature. All of this. You don't need to be a doctor or a scientist or an expert economist. Everything in life is human nature. If you understand human nature, you can predict what people will do. You can see things happening as they're happening because it's all the stinking same. You just change the nouns and the verbs. Life is a game of Mad Libs. It's all the same. You understand people's biases and motives, and you follow the money and the power, and it all makes sense. When it comes to power, California has a tradition of recalling governors. So here in California, we need signatures of 1.5 million residents. And right now, we're at 1.2 million. So Newsom hears footsteps, which is another motive for him starting to open up the state again. Now, here's why I bring this up. Newsom said going into this whole thing that all of his policy decisions regarding COVID would be driven by data, and the data would be shared with the public to provide maximum transparency. Isn't that wonderful? Check this out from the AP. With the state starting to emerge from its worst surge, his administration won't disclose key information that will help determine when his latest stay-at-home order is lifted, which it was yesterday. State health officials said they rely on a very complex set of measurements that would confuse and potentially mislead the public if they were made public. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. Gavin Newsom and the rest, and it's true for all these blue states, have betrayed in a life-altering / life-shattering way for some, betrayed the people of California. That is pure treachery by Newsom. Oh yeah, we're gonna release all the data, we're gonna make everything very transparent, very open. Okay, where's the data? Well, it's complicated. You wouldn't understand. One of the main reasons for the latest lockdown, they said, was if ICU capacity is under 15%. Okay, well, it was under 15%, so they shut it all down. It's still under 15%. In Sacramento, which opened up first, it's at 9%, which is right where it was when everything was first shut down. The Department of Public Health spokesperson said, at the moment, the projections are not being shared publicly. That's unconscionable from Newsom and our elites and our betters. And now with states starting to consider cycle threshold levels, you're gonna see cases drop like 90% overnight. And it'll be a miracle, a Biden miracle. More hypocrisy here. Here's Biden back in November saying he has a plan. Check it out. He's got a plan. He's going to get it under control. And here he is the other day. He has nothing we can do. Here's Biden on the travel ban. Banning all travel from Europe. It's not going to stop it. Here's the other day. Okay, travel ban from Europe and other places. My favorite is Biden's goal is 100 million vaccines in 100 days. And if you just do a Google news search on 100 million vaccines, and every article is framed the same way, every single article is, it's going to be tough. Not sure if we can do it. It's going to be very difficult as a country, but you know what? Biden's a dreamer. Joe Biden dreams big. And that's the kind of leader we need. We can do it. This is America. And it looks like a big number. I mean, it is, right? 100 million vaccines in 100 days. Pfizer and Moderna said they'll have 200 million by the end of March. That's only 60 days away. So it shouldn't be that hard. And before Biden even took office, we were doing 1 million vaccine a day. So if we're doing, not great at math, and it's hard to do it here on the TV, right? A lot of pressure to get the math right here. If we're doing 1 million vaccines a day, 1 million for one day, and if Biden wants to do 100 million over 100 days, that's no different. Nothing will change. Nothing needs to change from what Trump was doing. But the media is framing it as, wow, it's going to be real hard. Remember when Trump said in May we're going to have a vaccine by the end of the year, and he was mocked by our bettors? That's impossible. Biden says we're going to try to get 100 million vaccines. Don't know if we can do it. And the media's like, yeah, I don't know. It's going to be difficult. Like they're framing it as like this is Biden's moonshot. Here's the strategy. Let me be clear. Biden's strategy is to undersell everything. Right? The quotes that from his team these last couple of days is, we're inheriting the worst situation ever. It's worse than imagined. We have to start from scratch. There's nothing even left to rebuild from. Total incompetence, right? That's all setting the stage. Those are actual quotes, unnamed sources. And all that does is set up the miraculous achievement to do what? Anything. Like whatever. Anything that happens that's good. Any little tiny thing at all. Even if Trump was on pace to do 100 million vaccines in 100 days and Biden hits 50, it's still going to be framed as, well, I mean, listen, we came in here with no plan. Of course they came in with a plan. We were already doing 1 million a day. But it's really amazing that we even got to 50 million. Congratulations. Thank you, Biden. Thank you, Biden. See the setup? Trump was trying to be positive with COVID, right? Like, we can do this as a country. We can do this. We're going to get through this. We're going to have a vaccine by the end of the year, right? He said that he is the country's cheerleader, and the left eviscerated him for that. Oh, you're lying to the American people. You're downplaying the virus. Bombshell audio from Trump saying he's downplaying the virus. Yeah, bombshell audio from an interview that he knew he was being recorded on with Bob Woodward. But it's bombshell audio. And what did people want? What did you want? Did you want Trump every single day to walk out there and be like, oh, everyone's going to die. We're all going to die. Everyone freak out. What'd you want? Did you want it to be doomsday all day, every day? Well, you got it. You got it from Biden. He's taking the pessimistic sales tactic. And it's only going to work if the media is on board with it, which of course they are. Right? The media needed to be on board with the lie that Trump had no plan, right? And the media just had to be like, oh, no plan. Without ever being like, there was a plan, actually. Here was the plan. And there were 1 million vaccines already being distributed. Like, the media obviously didn't report any of that. Right? So they have to be on board with that. And they have to be on board with the vaccine part. Like, whew, I don't know if we can do that. They have to be on board with just the whole pessimism of, we're in a really bad stretch here, right? And then when things get better, all the credit goes to our Savior. The media will do his bidding. And the people will fall for it. Except for you. True story. Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. All right. Last segment. got me upset. Got me angry. And I don't want to do that. I don't like it. Remember the quote from Marcus Aurelius we shared the other day? Such as are your habitual thoughts, such also will be the character of your mind. For the soul is dyed by the thoughts. Dye it then with a continuous series of thoughts such as these. All right, I love that. So the soul is dyed by the thoughts. So dye your soul with thoughts such as these. And he goes on and lists them, but this is where I bring in Philippians 4:8. Whatever is true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, and praiseworthy, think about such things. These are the thoughts that need to dye our soul. That's some ancient wisdom right there. So take a deep breath as we move on. I want to share this quote here from James Lindsay, who's wonderful. He says, the media sells hysteria and paranoia. Their first project now is absolutely discrediting Trump's administration, which they can do it in a way they've never done before because he is muzzled. No trust for bedwetters. Those are bedwetters. What? That's a term for a type of progressive who is a pansy, scared all the time, weak, Trump derangement syndrome, right? Perfect example of that is this guy. I don't know this guy. He's got a show on Peacock TV. I don't know what that is. I think that's like NBC streaming. I don't know what goes on there, right? He's got 1 million followers on Twitter. I've never heard of him before. Mehdi Hassan, he's on MSNBC and stuff. All right, here's what he put the other day. He said, for the past 5.5 years, since I moved to this country and Trump, came down that escalator, this man has dominated my waking and sleeping hours, my professional and personal life. Ask my wife. Now he's gone. It's over. Perhaps I can catch up on sleep, get a hobby maybe. Wow. Yeah, you should have always had a hobby or, a life. Good night, man. He's dominated your waking and sleeping hours and your professional and personal life? That's not healthy, man. James Lindsay, he said, there's literally nothing better for your mental state that you can do than to stop watching cable news and stop taking social media seriously. There's nothing you can do better for your mental state. I think of it like dieting. Like if you want to diet, you want to lose a bunch of weight, like the number one first thing you have to do is stop drinking soda. If you just cut out soda, you'll lose 10 pounds. Boom. Just like, and same thing, if you want to improve your mental state, just stop with the cable news. Just cut it out. Cut it out of your diet completely. And again, join us over at mikeslater.locals.com where we take all this and put it into action. It's a quiet place that we can think deeply about important things as opposed to like this insanity. I want to make the point here in this segment that what plays out in politics, this guy's life for the last, Mehdi Hassan, his life for the last 5 years, but I mean, there's tons of examples of it. Right? What plays out in politics is a replacement for war and a search for meaning. What we've seen and continue to see played out in politics, it's a proxy. It's a proxy for war and a search for meaning. Now, of course, there is meaning in politics. It is important, right? There's importance to it. But politics has turned into this God in and of itself. So my argument is that we live in such a soft, comfortable existence that people build up villains so they can feel like heroes. Make sense? We live in a comfortable, safe life so people build up villains so they can feel like heroes. Let me back it up for a second. So I'm reading this book, Last Stands by Michael Walsh. It's fantastic. It's about these famous last stand battles in history. I just read about the Alamo last night, for example, right? And they're all examples of, and I've never heard of any of the other battles. Well, Thermopylae, right? So it starts with Thermopylae and there's the Alamo, and I've never heard of the other ones, right? And I'm going to share one of the stories here. But these are battles where the losing side, they lost, and all hope was lost, right? They're like, we're all going to die. But they never gave up, and they died in glory. And while they lost the battle, their side, their cause, their mission still won ultimately, right? They lost the battle but won the war. So here's an example of this. We'll bring it back to the day. The siege of Svigetvar. The siege of Svigetvar. I've never heard of this. 1566. So you had the Ottomans, you had the Muslims were trying to get to Vienna to take down the West. Vienna and Rome, those were the two prizes for the Muslims who wanted to take over the world. So they wanted to take over Vienna, but they had to make it through this castle in today's Hungary in order to get there. So you had 100,000 Muslims. Some say up 200,000. We'll say 100,000 versus 2,300 Croats and Hungarians. So it's Muslims versus Christians. Right? 100,000 versus 2,300. It's known as the battle that saved Western civilization. I've never heard of it. Isn't that pathetic? I was a history major in college, and I've never heard of this. And it's known as the battle that saved Western civilization. Okay, so the Christians, they knew they were goners. I mean, 100,000 versus 2,000, right? So the only thing left to do was to open up the castle gate and charge across this narrow bridge and fight and die to the last man. This is Michael Walsh. Everyone in a besieged city knew what his or her fate would be should the walls come tumbling down. The men and boys were to be slaughtered or enslaved, and the women and girls to be raped into concubinage or sold into sexual and domestic slavery. There was no contemporary moral element in any of this. These were simply the spoils of war, the bonus pay due to a victorious army, right? So this is what there was no like mercy. There was no, rules of engagement say, like, no, you win, you take all the women and kill all the men. You lose, you die. That's it. That's right. And even around that whole time, death back then was even more certain than it is for us now, right? Because he just didn't live a long time. And it was so prevalent. Death hung over us, hung over people so hardly, so harshly, that death was almost the point of life. Because it wasn't, would you die? Obviously we all die, but how would you die? So back then, most people died from disease and accidents. But if you could die a noble death on the battlefield, it was the best you could ask for. And we don't think like that today. No one's thinking about a noble death, right? So I want to share here the speech that the Christian leader gave to his men as they were about to charge out of the castle into the Muslim horde. He said, "Let us not recoil then from going to our deaths, which will give us a path to eternal joy. Today, soldiers, we must lose our lives, and today all our trials end. We've lived nobly, let us die nobly. Give the entire world an example by it. Today we bring dignity upon our names. This gilds our past actions." I love that, gilds. It covers in gold our past actions. Give the entire world an example by it. Here we are talking about it 500 years later. Michael Walsh, does anybody in the West still think and talk like this? Do we still have a concept of what it's like to live and die nobly? Do we even have family names upon which to bring dignity instead of merely celebrity? Because that's what it is now, right? Remember we talked to an author the other day who wrote a book about honor. It's called The New Honor Code. Grant McCracken is his name. He said we used to live, honor used to be a concept. It's not anymore. It's been replaced by celebritydom. So now it's just about getting famous. So it doesn't matter how you get there. It doesn't matter who you are, what type of person you are, what type of man or woman you are. It's just, are you famous? And that's enough. That's celebritydom as opposed to honor, which implies a code of righteous behavior. Who still believes in going to eternal joy? Or a self-sacrifice, a fool's errand, a suicide charge into oblivion, which the world will little note and not long remember. If nothing is worth dying for, then what are we living for? In the end, all 2,000 of the Christians were killed. Well, they killed 20,000 Muslims. They were all killed. And the Muslims abandoned their push to Vienna. And they didn't try again for another 120 years. And by then, the West was able to build up their defenses, and it was an unsuccessful attack. I bring all this up because, first of all, whoever heard of the siege of Svigetvar? But my point is about human nature. We crave, just the primalness of us craves battle and glory and triumph and honor and dying nobly, right? And fighting nobly. That's humans. But we don't have any of that today. Right? It doesn't exist. So we find ways to fake it. So that guy from MSNBC and all the Trump derangement people, and all of us though, but them in particular, they live such soft, comfortable, safe lives. They have to make up a battlefield to find glory. Are you with me? Does that make sense? They have to make up a battlefield to find their glory. They have to, that way they can be the hero, right? Because to be a hero, you got to have a villain. So they make up a villain so they can be the hero. And Trump, for the last 4 years, has been their made-up villain. That's why everything is way blown out of proportion. Because there's no real problems to deal with. Or it seems like there's not, anyway. Now the problem with this is, guys like that are so used to being the hero in their made-up story. There's no way that guy's now going to actually find a hobby. Remember he said, he's like, well, Trump's gone, maybe I should find a hobby. He's not going to. He's not going to go like take up woodworking now. He has too much fame, too much money, too much fake glory. So he'll find new villains to fight. And even though he's living in a fantasy world in his head, he and people like him will cause real damage in the process. I gotta take a break here, but I gotta share this just because I said there's no real battles to fight because we live in a safe, comfortable world. It's not. We've deluded ourselves into thinking, and we've like protected ourselves with money and things, right? That we've separated ourselves from the actual terrible things that do exist in our world that we all should be united around and fighting against. So just the other day, the FBI did a raid up in LA called Operation Lost Angels. Have you heard of this? Of course not. Started on January 11th, they recovered 33 children who were in the sex trade. 8 of them were being sexually exploited at the time they were recovered. That's an amazing story, right? That's an amazing story with real villains, real people to be rescued, like horrific trauma, slavery, sex trade, and real heroes, like busting down doors, saving the day. Why is the media not covering this? Why do we all not know about Operation Lost Angels? It's not political, and we need politics. Everything's got to be political all the time. We can't unite over anything ever. There's got to be R's over here, D's over here. So that story of Operation Lost Angels, it doesn't fit the format of cable news. It doesn't fit the business format of cable news. But it's a huge issue. Sex trafficking, child trafficking in America. I live in San Diego, right here on the border, right? It's a huge, huge, massive issue. It would be swell if we could all get on board with this, and instead of bickering over stupid things and shaming conservatives who don't want to give puberty blocking hormones to kids, how dare you not want to do that, right? Instead of that, maybe we should shame people who, I don't know, want to have sex with kids. Maybe we could have a massive cultural push to root out child molesters from our society. How about that for a unifying message? We have these made-up boogeymen of white supremacists, right? The president takes his time at the inaugural address to talk about white supremacists and domestic terrorists. There was some study done a while back about how many Klansmen there really are in America. There's like 50, okay? It's like nothing. There's way more pedophiles. Let's root them out. It's a real evil in America. So why are we not interested as a society in that? Is it because we don't want to think about it because it's actually so evil? And we don't even want to, we feel uncomfortable even thinking about how horrific it is. Rather stay safe. Is it because no political power comes from it? Maybe it's because there's no money to be made off of it, off of covering the story. Or maybe because if we want to solve the problem, it involves actual work. There's a real battlefield. We're not interested in that. Way easier to pretend to do something and pretend to be a hero against pretend villains than to actually do anything real. True story. Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. So I am no fan of public schools, so it's weird to have me make the argument that we got to get our kids back in school. But the fact that our kids have been out of school for a year and there's no scientific backing behind this whatsoever, and some schools are saying they don't want kids back for another year until all the kids are vaccinated, that is insane. Miley Smith is here. She's from the Illinois Policy Institute to specifically talk about Chicago. Illinois. Miley, how are you today?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good. Thanks for being here. So let us know the players that are involved with what's happening in Chicago. And it's a good microcosm for many districts across the country, obviously.
It is. It's a great example of what happens when unions hold too much power over parents and students. Illinois has long been a bastion of union power, and in Chicago, Teachers Union has a long history of going on strike. And the latest issue is that they do not want to go back to school in person. And so what they have done is passed a resolution that is two parts. The first part says that they will not return to the classroom. They refuse to go to work. They will only teach remotely. And the second part is, should the school district lock them out of their computers, lock them out of their online platforms, then they will go on strike. Now, the real kicker here is that technically under Illinois law, that kind of a strike is likely illegal because they're not, the whole purpose of collective bargaining laws is to prevent labor strife, especially if they're under contract. Here there's a contract, but they're still threatening to walk out on the students and the parents.
Okay. What has the courts said?
So the union has gone to the labor board, not yet to court, but they've gone to the labor board and asked twice for the labor board to stop in-person schooling. And the labor board told them no at this point in time. They can always appeal to the courts. They can go back to the labor board now that they are closer. They're alleging that it is an unfair labor practice to require them to be in school. But the district has already said they have met more than 40 times with the union and have agreed on major health and safety protocols. So, they're claiming safety, but the labor board has already told them that they will not stop in-person learning, and yet the union is still threatening to not go back to school.
Amazing. Okay, so what do you think the union actually has medical concerns, or are they using this as leverage to get other things that they've always wanted?
Based on the history of Chicago Teachers Union, I would say that they are using this to leverage a political agenda. Like I said, they have already met dozens of times. CPS, the Chicago Public Schools, has said they've met and agreed on health and safety protocols. And in the past, Chicago Teachers Union has a history of trying to get things in their contracts, trying to negotiate for things that really have nothing to do with education. And so I think this is them trying to flex their political muscles. They pride themselves on being an example of, going on strike that, sets the stage for other unions across the country. And so that's what I think is happening here.
Yeah, if that's true, and I agree, that's appalling. That's horrific. That's right, like to deprive the children that they say they're there for from an education for a year now. It could be 2.
It could be, right.
That's like, and based off no science, right? What are people, like, what studies are being brought in here about how dangerous it is for parents or for the teachers to even be in school?
That brings up a great point about transparency, and your question before does as well. Because these negotiations happen behind closed doors, we don't know what the teachers union is really claiming. We don't know what they're really demanding. We know what they say to the public, but when you look at what they're saying to the public, first of all, it's contradicted by the school district, and they aren't, giving any sort of groundbreaking study that they're relying upon. On the other hand, the Chicago Public Schools keep citing studies that are worldwide or what's happening in Chicago itself. There are about 20,000 students in Catholic schools, 90 plus Catholic schools in Chicago that are already back at school, have been since the fall, and they've seen no significant outbreaks. So, it's a good question. What are they relying on? We don't know.
That's amazing. That's so true. It's the same thing here in San Diego. It'd be one thing if we said, hey, in England, they still meet, or in France, they still meet, but you don't even have to do that. It's the same thing here in San Diego. The private schools are meeting, and there's been no outbreaks. Like, it's a one-to-one. We have the case study. In Chicago, you have the case study. Why are people so scared still, or why do people give the teachers union the benefit of the doubt here when they don't deserve that?
Right, and I read or I've listened to teachers' comments, and I feel sorry for them because I feel like the union has created a panic situation for them. They have seeded the ground, terrifying teachers, thinking that they're going to die if they go back to school, as opposed to pointing out the fact that this is happening. Schools, even across Illinois, public schools have gone back to school safely. There's no significant outbreaks. Are people coming down with COVID? Yes, but in our personal school district, they chart them every week, and there have been no significant health issues with children going or teachers being back at school.
Wow, that's unreal. All right, Miley Smith from the Illinois Policy Institute. Thank you for your insight, Miley. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, have a good day. She's inspired me. We have to do this tomorrow. We're going to do a segment on masks and kids and traumatizing our kids. And there's no such thing as a solution, right? There's only trade-offs. And the trade-off, kids aren't dropping like flies from COVID. The trade-off of masking our kids and terrifying them is not at all worth the health benefits of even wearing masks and telling kids, don't touch anything. Don't play with him. Don't be close. Cancel everything all year. No birthday parties or anything. This is insane. It has to stop. And we're creating a generation of traumatized kids because of it. We're going to do a whole segment on that tomorrow. All right, coming up next, we'll talk about why we're not getting shots in arms. What are the logistical hurdles that we're failing to jump over when it comes to actually distributing the vaccine? We'll do that next. Mike Slater, True Story, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. This came up on the show yesterday, usage rates. So usage rate is how many vaccines a state has and how many of them are actually being put into people's arms. And California, where I live, is the worst of all the states. We're at like 38%, I think, of the vaccines that we have, we're actually putting into people's arms. And no state is really doing a great job of this, quite frankly. So what's the breakdown here? What's the problem? What's happening here? Why aren't we distributing this vaccine way quicker, especially when other countries like Israel, population 8 million, but at least, they got almost everyone vaccinated right now. One of our favorite guests, C. Kennedy, is here. He is a senior fellow at the Security Studies Group. What's up, C. Kennedy? How are you, man?
Doing good, Mike. How you doing, bud?
Good. So define the problem here for us. What's the issue that people are scratching their heads about?
Well, initially it was a situation where the question was how do we get vaccines off the docks of Pfizer and Moderna's manufacturing facilities as fast as possible and get them out to the states. And everybody kind of focused on that problem. What we're finding the real bottleneck is a very human bottleneck. And that really kind of comes in two flavors. First is how are states individually taking the CDC guidance and criteria that rolled out for the phase 1A, phase 1B, phase 2, and phase 3, and interpreting that at the state level. That has an enormous bearing on the second human, sort of human bottleneck or choke point, which is a word I've routinely abused, which is once we've identified where the people are that need to be vaccinated, do the facilities that we would intend to service them have the infrastructure in place, and particularly the people, qualified caregivers that know how to do injections, do we have enough of those? And that continues to be an issue we see pretty much across the United States. A little over 40, I've got it written down here, 41.4 million vaccines have been distributed as of yesterday's data dump to the CDC. and only 22.7 have actually been administered. So just a little over half of the doses that have gone out from Pfizer and from Moderna have actually made it to arms so far. Given the cold chain requirements on these things, that's a pretty alarmingly low percentage, especially since this whole thing was conceived as kind of a just-in-time supply chain, as opposed to we're going to have to store these things for a long time while we figure out how to make injections happen.
So it's really interesting. Let's celebrate, first of all, the last time we talked about the logistical hurdles of getting them off of the docks and out of the manufacturing facilities into airplanes around the country and world. Like, that's an amazing achievement of logistics that seems to be successful. But you're right, it's that last mile, which is always the most expensive and most difficult, and as you said, most human perhaps. Okay, so let's solve this. Instead of whining about it, what is your solution?
So it's really sort of a four-part thing. The first would be to re-involve the military at, I think, a larger scale. Now, some of the states have called up the National Guard. They've got them doing injections, in some cases storage and distribution. But what we have here is kind of this very scattershot approach at the state level. Now, under ideal circumstances, that federalist approach works very, very well. But there's a reason that we have the National Response Framework and NIMS to handle high-speed, fast-developing crisis type events. A pandemic in this case is not as high speed, but it is something that is somewhat akin to a hurricane hitting across the whole United States and just kind of sitting for a year. So following more of a federalized framework to get down to the final mile would be the start. So my proposal would involve taking several key military bases that are part of the strategic highway network and utilizing those as regional distribution and storage hubs. If you look at a map of a 600-mile radius of each of these bases, it neatly overlaps with about 100% of the United States population. And you would have every single person in the United States, or at least in the continental 48, would have primary and secondary overlapping coverage from any of these bases. So first would be, let's quit trying to run a just-in-time operation to 100 cities based on this very sort of hazy, fast-moving guidelines that are being issued from the states in terms of who's getting vaccinated and when. Let's get the product off the docks to the manufacturers and get them closer to the people who actually need them, as opposed to just trying to run them through the UPS and FedEx networks, globally. Second thing we would do.
Let me pause here. So my instinct is twofold: federalist and free market. So my instinct is, no, let every state figure it out. And we'll have petri dishes of experimentation, and we'll see who does it better. And hopefully California can stop screwing it up and start being more like Florida or whoever. And then my other thing is, well, Amazon and Walmart are like the best at distributing things. So leave it up to the free market to do that properly. And when I hear about a top-down approach with the military too, I get a little hesitant. But I trust you. So tell me why the federalist and the free market approaches maybe wouldn't work, and why I shouldn't be skeptical of the military approach.
Well, we have a really good analog to utilizing companies like Amazon and Walmart during a crisis. I mentioned the NRF and NIMS framework earlier. So in a situation like where we have to get water to New Orleans after a hurricane, like we had to do after Katrina, Walmart and Walgreens and Anheuser-Busch and everybody else mobilized very, very rapidly to get cans and bottles of water in when you could almost get nothing in. It works extremely well in really specific sort of scenarios. But when you're talking about a simultaneous nationwide rollout across the entire 48, even Amazon and Walmart, as good as their infrastructure is still a commercially focused infrastructure. So you've still got the choices that they have to make in terms of capacity within their network is going to be, do they favor the freight that actually pays the bills, or are we going to have to make up any loss associated with them being part of the operating network for that? With the military, you don't have that. You also have a span of control issue. This is something that requires not a heavy-handed approach, but certainly a very strong command and control function where you've got a control tower brain that's helping make a lot of these decisions for a lot of parts of the country simultaneously. The military does mobilization extremely well. So this is a situation where it instead of having multiple verticals and stovepipes or potential stovepipes of data, of transparency and clarity about who's getting what, where, and when, you've now got one formalized, centralized structure that has the ability to not only make those decisions rapidly, but also move the decisions up and down the chain of command and execute very quickly.
Okay. All right, so let's go with that. So step one is you say we get the vaccines to all the military bases that have within a 600-mile radius can cover the entire country. How many of those bases are there?
I think I have 12 would be. So 10 of them are part of the Strategic Highway Network. And then I added in MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa to give you good coverage because, Florida's actually kind of a logistically difficult state in some ways. And then I added another military base up in California that's not part of the Strategic Highway Network.
Okay, what's step two?
Step two is you have to identify all of the routes to the major, what I would call sub-regional hubs. So a regional hub could be, say, Fort Hood in Texas that covers the majority of Texas. A sub-regional hub would be a centralized warehousing capability in, say, Houston and Dallas and in El Paso. So just using Texas as an example, because it's geographically a huge state. So what you would have then is these sub-regional hubs. You would have to identify these routes and identify truckload and sprinter van and box truck carriers that have the ability and experience to handle cold chain and can run those routes on a daily basis between the warehousing hubs and to the sub-regional hubs. Out of those regional hubs in, say, Houston or a Dallas, what you would then have that facility doing is coordinating with all of the facilities, the hospitals, the schools, the long-term care facilities, the CVSs and Walgreens, everybody that's already in the network, and getting a daily demand forecast of how much you need and what. From there, then it's very, very, very simple to have a straight shot of just a team of couriers. You can utilize an Uber-type platform to demand match this. That technology exists today, and then just provide the drivers with the coolers and the dry ice packs or the ice gel packs that they need to make the deliveries. Here's your route. Here's all the places you have to hit today. Bring everything back at the end of your working day, and we'll send more out tomorrow. So that is more akin to how Amazon does it.
Are you going to people's houses?
Potentially, you could potentially do that if your network of couriers was big enough, but right now the goal would be to still get as many doses into the hands of the long-term care facilities and hospitals and the main caregiving sites within a given market.
Okay, that sounds very phase one-y, right? Or like maybe the older people or whatever. What do we then do with once we start getting to more people, right? Is everyone expected to go to one of these centers, these long care centers, or would you distribute it out even more from there?
You could distribute it out even more from there. That would be where you would start to get down into not only CVS and Walgreens, but also Walmart or Kroger or Publix or pick any pharmacy in the area could have individuals who are trained in the ability to give injections. And that's where you would take anybody who's got qualifications in EMTs and paramedics, doctors, nurses, anybody, any spare labor capacity that's in the market or could be in the market, populate them in as many places and as many neighborhoods as possible. So in this way, we kind of step that just what is now a just in time. We've got to get a few packages from, Pfizer's manufacturing facility in Michigan all the way to a hospital in Miami that's doing injections and hope that it all goes perfectly. Now we've shortened the chain at each step and built excess capacity in so that if they want to run a vaccination push in a given city or in a given neighborhood, maybe we want to get a bunch of teachers done in a given geographic area to get that knocked out as part of the plan, then we could do that. We could just, send enough doses into that CVS that's central to those people, use a courier service to do it, and everybody can run through in a day or two.
Okay, interesting. Two questions, and we'll get about 2 minutes. Pfizer and Moderna says they can have 200 million vaccines made by the end of March. If we did it this way, do you think we could distribute all 200 million of those by March?
Doing it this way, yes. Doing it the way we're currently doing it, you're going to be looking at a much higher wastage rate. You're going to be looking at a lot. Let's not forget that we're using UPS and FedEx as the main carriers. Now, UPS and FedEx are fine for what they do, particularly in the e-commerce side. But whenever you're using commercial carriers, what you are doing is you are competing with commercial activity, A, that tends to pay pretty well, and B, that is already kind of choking their networks. It's misdeliveries and things like that are continuing to expand. If we need to dump, if we've got 41.5 million distributed right now. That means we need to have another 150 million out in the next 60 days. And in order to do that and to do it right, you're going to need more. You're going to need more flex or capacity in the market. And the only way to do that is to get more of those doses into the regional hubs, as opposed to just hoping and praying that you can get every one of those boxes off the dock of the manufacturer and into the right hands.
I got 1 minute. Sorry to do this to you, but what I think I really visualize what you're saying. How are we doing it now? And you kind of touched on it, but give me like the very, very easy to understand about how we're distributing them now that's failing.
Sure. So what the states are doing is they're saying, here's our demand forecast for the next however many days, whatever it may be. And then Pfizer and Moderna are saying, okay, well, we're going to have to allocate you because we've got 60 other entities that are competing for this. Some states are taking more of a centralized approach. West Virginia is doing that. They're using the National Guard. They've got distribution sites already identified. Other states are taking more of a county level approach, and the counties are saying, well, this is how much we need. And then it's going to a state designated facility, and then the counties are having to arrange their own transportation to go pick the stuff up and get it to the long-term care facilities or hospitals. It's a very scattershot, disorganized approach when you add up all 50 states.
How would a county organize? How would they figure that out? Would they use UPS or something?
In a lot of cases, they wouldn't. In some cases, they contract with somebody who's got a box truck with a refrigeration unit on it to go, hey, go to this warehouse at this time and pick these boxes up.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, all right, yeah, I'm convinced. Okay, where do we learn more? What's your Twitter / this American Mind article is called Send in the Vaccine Troops. A nice nod to Tom Cotton. What's your Twitter? People can learn more.
The Twitter handle is @man_integrated. The name usually is some variant of Huntsman on there. Talk a lot about the logistics of life and geopolitics on there. So it's come check it out and stick around. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, great. All right, last question. I lied. Why don't we do it this way?
I think Trump wanted to give a win to the private sector. I mean, he like a lot of people has an unfailing belief in the private sector's ability to streamline and manage and organize around this stuff. And 99% of the time, I would agree with that. But just like we wouldn't want to have private entities taking us, leading war, we want to have our own people, that have their own incentives that don't involve necessarily profit. In situations like this, having the ability to tell people what to do is a little bit better.
Yeah, very convincing. All right, you're the man. See Huntsman. Thanks, brother. See Kennedy. Let's do it again.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, brother. All right, that's our show. Do it again tomorrow. True story, Mike Slater. Spread the word.